Jason, to begin, you've gone on record saying that it's too late for our southern border. Tell us, what can the U.S. do now?
Well, there's a lot of things the United States can do, but the first thing is that we have to stop looking at the border problem as an immigration issue. That's just one layer to the problem. I have said for the last 3.5 years that what we've really been witnessing at the southwest border is the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11. And I've said that for a multitude of reasons, and that is because the fight from yesterday that you deal with is not what you're going to deal with today. And what's a great example of what I'm talking about here? We have lost 111,355 Americans to drug overdoses. Now, most of that due to deadly fentanyl as the cartels have weaponized it. So the world has changed as we remember it. What has happened in Mexico has changed. The threats coming into this country have changed as we watch the cartels evolve and work with dark networks all around the world. So when I say to you that it's the largest U.S. intelligence failure since 9/11, it's not the immigration side of it I'm talking about. I'm talking about the synergy that's taking place with these alcohol smugglers, with the Halcon network, and with the alien smuggling organizations, and how they've been able to impact the American people, because the data validates that they are the biggest threat to the American people right now. When you look, but there's not a terrorist organization in the world that has killed as many Americans as the Mexican cartels, yet outdated definitions, outdated priorities still exist to this day.
And on the threat of who's coming across the border, Randy, the Border Patrol is saying it's seeing a massive increase in individuals on the terror watch list trying to enter the country. How do we know where they're ending up in the country? Are there sleeper cells?
Well, that's a very good question. And to answer that, we've let our defenses down. So, yes, it's an intelligence failure. An intelligence failure coupled with robbing our defense, getting rid of our ability to give proper vetting to these folks. We know that over 50,000 special interest minors last where they went, that's a very good question, because the mechanisms to track that are overwhelmed with the other 2 million that came in that. So the answer is we just don't know. The scary part about that is that those that may not have been radicalized already may be radicalized once they stay here for a while. Because we've seen a lot of the protests around the street where people are very sympathetic with Hamas right now. So are they going to be radicalized? Are they going to join that? Not already. But we've got to remember, these are long-term planners. If there is some plan to harm Americans, it was hatched a long time ago, and it may take months or even years for us to see this. So the danger is real.
And Michael, going to you, I know you're in Belize. You were at the Darien Gap seeing who's coming in. Give us a sense of the countries these people are originating from.
Right. I'm constantly walking the line from the U.S. border. I'm all the way from SpaceX to San Diego on the Mexican and U.S. side, all the way down to Tapachula, which is the southernmost Mexican city. Now I'm in Belize, which is a country that's on the southern Mexican border as well, next to Guatemala. I just left Panama. I'm constantly out in the Darien Gap in Panama, sometimes Colombia, or over in Morocco, across Europe, watching the same thing. In fact, I was just over in Georgia and Armenia watching the same thing, the country of Georgia. So I'm looking at this from a very different perspective. I call the U.S. border the eggshell. That's just one aspect of this. The biggest enemies clearly are the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party. And the local players, which the Mexican cartels, are incredibly dangerous and incredibly well-funded and incredibly enabled and able. But on the global scale, they're just one player. The main pump engine for invasion of the United States is clearly the World Economic Forum, the Chinese Communist Party, and our own captured government, the United States government. For instance, down in the camps in Darien Gap in Panama, our flags are in those camps. I'm in those camps all the time. I was just down there in the Gap for several more weeks. And after I left the Gap, I came back and chartered an airplane and flew over it and mapped the new camps. We're building new camps down there now. These 2 new camps that are being built right now. Okay, let me rewind the tapes. In April of 2021, I was out in the Gap and I photographed a logbook where in that logbook about 200 to 300 or so people were coming through per day, right? That was April of 2021. Now the number is about 10 times that number. But now they're building more camps and more infrastructure. Instead of running on average about 60 buses per day, they're increasing that to 200 buses per day right now, right? So the flows are increasing dramatically. They're building 2 new camps. Again, I was just on the ground looking at the camps, and then I went back with an airplane and photographed them from the sky. These 2 new camps are big enough for 30,000 people per day. 30, not 3,000, 30. So this could increase by tenfold. So in other words, from April of 2021 to now, it's increased by more than tenfold, and now it's poised to increase another tenfold. So that will be 100-fold over April of 20, and this is way beyond outside of the Mexican cartel. We have people flying in every day. For instance, flights go to Istanbul, Turkey, then they fly to Bogota, and then many people fly straight from Colombia to the United States. Or we have Chinese and others flying into Quito, Ecuador. I just had a team down there. In fact, they're down there now, and they're in the Darien Gap right now. But they left Quito, went through Colombia. There's hotels filled with Chinese now. So the Chinese are flying into Quito, Ecuador, as are others, and many of those Chinese fly straight to the United States, or they fly to Mexico City or Cancun. We also have the huge number of people that fly straight from Colombia straight to the United States, Mexico City, Cancun, that sort of thing. We have a huge amount of people. The Haitians used to come through the Darien Gap in huge numbers a couple of years ago, but now every day several thousand are landing in Nicaragua, and so they're bypassing Panama. So we've got all these different feeders. That's just here. Now, when I go over to Europe, I see something similar, only more advanced. Japan, very similar, except Japan is the least advanced stages of these things, but the preparatory information war is well underway in Japan. So what we're seeing here is a massive wartime invasion, whereas right now we have 4 carrier battle groups heading over towards the Middle East or already there, which is about half of our naval assets. And several of our other carriers are in maintenance right now. So we're being distracted by Ukraine and Israel and these sorts of things, while our border is look, these gentlemen live on the border. I'm down there a lot too. It does not exist. Jason says that all the time. I watch his show. The border doesn't exist. It's gone. Watch
Right.
Jason's show.
Yes, very concerning points you just raised. We have to go to a break right now, but we want to get to all of the other countries and the funding in just a minute. We'll be back with International Reporters Roundtable in just a minute.
It's interesting. Everything about the southern border, China, fentanyl. A guy I've known for years. He just passed away from it. So, yeah, southern border's got to get closed. I don't care what y'all say.
Center. Under the Obama administration, we would average 0 encounters with people on the terrorism screening center at your southwest border, maybe up to 5 per year. We've never seen or been anywhere where we are today. The other thing that's very, very important to understand here is that these relationships with these terrorist organizations trying to enter our country illegally to commit bad acts has been going on for a very long time. And I want to give you an example of what I'm talking about here because I was directly involved in this. One of my analysts called me in 2011 and said, Captain, listen, I want you to know we're working a major case here in Houston with DEA Strike Force. We may have just identified a Quds Force operative working for Iran who just tried to hire one of our sources who's a Law Zeta member, who at the time, that was one of the most hyper-violent cartels in Mexico. And they're trying to assassinate a Saudi ambassador in Washington, D.C. My analyst identified that individual assigned to that DEA Strike Force. It was one of the biggest terrorism cases in this country. So when you hear me say that the cartels are major players in this, you have to remember, Sinaloa is operating in 54 countries, Cartel Jalisco New Generation in at least 48 that we know of. But from there, the synergy between what we call Tier 1 gangs, major gangs that impact multiple regions of our country, work with juveniles all over this country and have really commit multiple acts of violence domestically. They also work with our local street gangs. So the logistics to get these people into the country, the gatekeepers become the cartels. The problem is that the American people aren't told. And this is the job of the United States intelligence agencies. This is the job of the Homeland Security enterprise. And from the cartel's perspective, the reason this is so important is that we in the West, we consider Middle East terrorist organizations here. We put them above, gangs, cartels, all of this because of what happened to us from 9/11. But when you look at it from the cartel's perspective, who have control of the logistics into our country, from their perspective, they're in charge. And in their backyard, they are in charge. Make no doubt about it. There's not a terrorist organization in the world that's more powerful than them in their own backyard. So you have to collaborate with them. You have to pay the piso or the tax and the money to get into this country. And we see it play out all along. Look, let's talk about the Chinese like Michael just talked about. He's absolutely right. The Zetas, formerly known as Zetas, now known as Cartel del Noreste, they're moving about 35 Chinese at a time, almost every night, into Fronton. Right before they cross, what do they make them do? Drop their passports, because they know as soon as they cross and turn themselves into Border Patrol, they have no idea who they really are. What does that do? That holds up the line, and then from there, the cartel can move deadly drugs into the country and a lot of munitions southbound.
And Jason, you mentioned the cartels getting money from this, and it seems a lot of the immigrants coming over are not really claiming asylum. They're citing economic woes. But how are they even getting the money to come here? Randy, tell us about the economics of migration.
Well, so there's money everywhere, especially for the cartels. They're very diversified. They don't just specialize in one thing. We know that highest drugs are going to be heroin, methamphetamine, and they still even dabble in marijuana, but they're into extortions, kidnappings. So they get their money from wherever they can. And the ones that they most focus on are the ones that are most profitable. We know some of the smuggling fees that people from mainland China pay are in the $50,000 range right now, according to the briefings that sources in the Border Patrol told me about. So they're capturing that money all the way through Mexico. The Mexican cartels are. But at times, they're even overwhelmed by those people that are coming in mass to the border. I was in Mexico just the beginning of September when 3,000 Venezuelans, mostly Venezuelans, hopped off a freight train and hit the border at one time. Well, the cartel doesn't have a mechanism to control that. They're going to get to those that they can get to, that have the money, that are going to pay and make it profitable. But the way our border has gone out of control, it's even overwhelming for them because they don't have the mechanism to deal with 3,000 people crossing in one fell swoop any more than the United States government. They're getting their money from special interest migrants. They're getting their money from folks like those from mainland China, and they're getting those that have familiar relationships in the United States. That money is getting transferred through extortions, through MoneyGram. We don't see physical cash crossing the border like we did years ago. It's all electronic transfers, and it doesn't seem like there's very much effort because overwhelming amount of people crossing to find that money.
And you mentioned fentanyl and the Chinese nationals crossing over here. Michael, you also brought up the Chinese nationals. Now, it seems in terms of fentanyl, almost everyone knows someone who has died from the drug, and many of the precursors come from China. Michael, why is the Chinese Communist Party targeting the U.S. through the southern border?
Well, numerous reasons. One is this is a clear war. This is very important to look at this from an orbital perspective. From an orbital perspective, the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party are consanguinated. They are like Nazi Germany and fascist Italy. They are really that tight. And these two parties are major players. They're not the only players. There are others as well. There's Iran and there's a who's who in the zoo. Nobody runs the jungle, right? The jungle is the jungle. But the two major players, the biggest players, are the World Economic Forum and the Chinese Communist Party. They are the main pumps that are driving these things. Now, the Chinese Communist Party, what I'm going to tell you is extremely important. They openly claim that everybody with Chinese DNA, everybody with Chinese genes, even if you're Cantonese speakers who have been in Panama for 150 years and you've never stepped foot anywhere out of Panama or never been to Asia at all, they claim that you're under their law. You are under Chinese Communist Party dominion, right? And jurisdiction. So they open police stations. What I'm about to say next is very important. They also claim that the Asians who apparently Bering Straits and settled North America, Central America, Mexico, and all the way down to Tierra del Fuego in South America, that those are migrants, right? You see where I'm going with this? So they claim that all this land in North and South America is Chinese, and then we took it from their people. That's what they're teaching the Chinese who are coming over. So that's one ecosystem. The Chinese are just one ecosystem of many, but the Chinese ecosystem is not coming to play games. They're coming to take the United States. Now, can they do that if they continue at this rate and the years pass by? Yeah, they can. They have biological weapons. These are very smart people. These are not a bunch of Haitians coming over. These are people that have high tech. They're very organized. For instance, when you look at the Chinese ecosystem that's coming through, they've got a system within a system, like Randy mentioned, and Jason has mentioned many times. There are some of these groups that are coming through that have their own networks. For instance, the snakeheads, the Chinese call them snakeheads, what we call coyotes, they call snakeheads. There are snakeheads in Quito and in Colombia and in Panama, all the way up. These snakeheads facilitate, and they're becoming increasingly organized. When you look at my old records that I got from photographing logbooks in 2021 coming through Darien, there might be one Chinese come today, two Chinese, zero Chinese. Now it's hundreds per day, and that number is increasing, dramatically increasing.
And Jason, I see you nodding along there. What was Michael saying that you were agreeing with?
Synergy. What he's talking about is synergy between these dark networks. It is why I went public after retiring. I was so frustrated that the American people were not being told about how these cartels who have, because of logistics I just mentioned, through street gangs, tier one gangs throughout our country, and now these cartels are working in synergy with dark networks all over the world. And so this is the real game changer that I think Americans have to understand, and why I get so frustrated. I just gave you a great example how long Iran has even been trying to, commit crimes, including terrorism, in our own country. And these cartels are major players with this. And I'll give you a great example of what I'm talking about here. We keep talking about Chinese chemical precursors. You hear it from the federal government all the time, working with the Mexican cartels. What they haven't told you is that they're also working with Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh to now get these chemical precursors into Mexico so that they continue to manufacture deadly fentanyl and methamphetamine to work around China. And so for what you hear from the federal government is we're going to, conduct blockades against their ships coming into to Mexico so that they can't get chemical precursors. Well, guess what? The cartels worked around that years ago. And, that's what frustrates me. We cannot look at yesterday's problems with the Middle East and what happened to us from 9/11 and think that that's the same threat stream we're facing today. The American people are being impacted the most in this country. And to me, they are what matters. Their families. I listen to these moms and dads. Guys, I will tell you, I have been humbled in my life. I've told many mothers and fathers that the people they love the most in the world are never coming home. If you want to be humbled in your life, tell a mom that her child's never coming home. Watch her collapse in front of you and bellow out with a scream that I don't even possess the ability to articulate. And now we've got these cartels moving in this poison. I left the Lost Voices of Fentanyl just 2 weeks ago, and I listened to a mom who lost her 3-year-old son who was crawling on the ground, and because there was residual fentanyl on the carpet, and what do babies do? They play with their mouth. It killed him. A mom who lost 2 children in one night from a fake pill. When I tell you the American people feel this problem from the open border, from the cartels, and the synergy with global dark networks, and I claim that they are the biggest problem facing the American people, and the data validates that, it's because that's exactly what's happening. The problem is we are still looking at problem sets the way we did in 2001. And what is impacting Americans, the game has changed. And look, I blame the Homeland Security.
Yeah, Sue is next.
A tiny country. I was there before the war broke out in Ukraine. I was down in Morocco with Chuck Holton, and we got word that Belarus was trying to push people into Poland and into Lithuania. So we flew up to Lithuania. Luckily, I had been with the Lithuanian army in Afghanistan, and I had good contacts. and they gave, Chuck stayed there for about a week, I stayed for 5 weeks, they gave me access to the camps, right? Now, Lithuania is keeping their little border closed. Poland was keeping their border mostly closed, at least to Middle Easterners and Africans, but Poland has now been overwhelmed with Ukrainians and others, right? The weaponized migration, for instance, looking from Turkey. Turkey uses the weaponized migration daily with Greece and the rest of Europe. If you go down to Morocco, Chuck Holton and I were down there watching Morocco weaponized migrants against the EU. There's 2 Spanish cities in Morocco. They're enclaves. So this is Africa, right? So there's 2 EU cities in Africa. And Morocco just lets people get into Ceuta and Melilla, these 2 Spanish cities. Ceuta and Melilla, you're in the EU. So these flows happen in many different ways. I mean, we can go on for hours about this, and I'll spare you that, of course. But the bottom line is, this is a global war. It's happening in Japan. I'll be back in Japan again soon. And by the way, if you want to see what's happening and where people are going, you have to watch the information war. Information war is vital to watch, right? I've written 3 books on Chinese Communist Party information war. Unfortunately, they're only in Japanese. They're not even in English, because I've been working to wake up Japanese for years on this. They're clearly going to make a go for Okinawa Prefecture. I mean, I was just over there months ago down in Ishigaki, which is next to Taiwan, because the Chinese Communist Party is clearly going to make a go at Ishigaki, which is like the Key West, you might say, of Japan. Anyway, we could go on for hours. The bottom line, this is a global war. One of the weapons is migration.
I mean, Michael, you raised some very important points, especially on information war. We want to get to all of that, but right now we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have more on the Fallout.
Country as the world is already laughing at us.
While we're dividing ourselves from within, while the nation is focused on internal battles, a greater threat looms on the horizon. The Chinese Communist Party.
绝不允许任何外来势力奴役我们。谁妄想这样干，必将头破血流。
They're systematically infiltrating our government. They're stealing our technology. And they're attacking our freedoms.
The FBI is opening a new China-related counterintelligence case about every 10 hours.
The Chinese are preparing for war. We Americans are very good at being oblivious as to what our enemies are saying. And we did not pay attention to Osama bin Laden until one day he killed 2,977 Americans.
This is not just a battle of ideologies or just about pursuit of dominance. This is a war that will alter the course of our lives. And if we lose, it will condemn our children and future generations to a world of unimaginable horrors. This is why my show in the Epoch Times is so critical. We're not afraid to take on the Chinese regime head on. And he said, they told me that if I keep talking to you, they're going to hire a hitman to chop off one of my hands. We're not afraid to call out the CCP for their atrocities. We're completely independent. Our only interest is in traditional journalism and reporting truthfully.
Bizarre news today. The Chinese Communist Party is opening up police stations, departments, and working as overseas bureaus all around the world, including right here in New York.
You heard that right. It's time to replace the Chinese regime's propaganda with truth. Get back to the basics. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All you have to do is subscribe to Epoch TV. You'll get so
more colorful now with our crayon from heaven. Please don't be sad. There isn't any sorrow, only laughter and joy for all of your tomorrow. We'll be sending you letters all through the year with our crayon from heaven. As I look at the heavens over that cloudy sky, your memories appear and draw a smile on my face. We'll always be together and you'll always be mine. Thank God for crayons from heaven. My darling, my life, the days are so long now. I miss you so much, I I can't believe you're gone. My heart was torn apart when you had to go, and I know that life changes, but I